Did you know that decision making massively drops with fatigue? It's true. I've noticed it, and probably you have noticed it every single time we start to get tired on the kart. And that's just for every walks of life. Doing any kind of sport, even if you're not doing sports and you're doing whatever, like if when you start to feel tired and you're exhausted, you start to not think clearly, right? You start to make mistakes, you start to make wrong judgments, wrong decisions, and that's exactly what happens because yes, it's just like how our bodies function. When we start to feel tired, we lose some water, specific amount of water in our bodies, and there's all sort of things, because there's also not just physical fatigue, but there's also mental fatigue. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I don't want to go in depth in that because I don't want to be spending too much time on that, but it's actually quite an evident thing when you are on the go-kart and you feel like you're getting slower, and you may not know why that is the case. It may be in the afternoon after a long day, or it may be after 3-4 days of racing, and it's the last day, and you feel like you're struggling more and more as the sessions go by, and you may not have the courage, or your ego would be too big to admit that you are tired, because if you admit that you're tired, you would feel like a weak, you would feel like a bit like a lazy and yeah, an unfit driver. But the reality is that when you are fatigued, you are losing lap time. Performance is going down. Your decision making is going down. So not only in terms of lap time, but also in terms of like racecraft decisions, reaction times. Everything slows down when you are tired. That is the reason why you have to work so goddamn hard when you are at home, in the gym or wherever you're going, if you're running, cycling, swimming. Like I like specifically doing cardio exercises, specifically when I'm, preparing for races. Cycling in first thing first, then I like to do a lot of running, especially going hiking through the hills, through the mountains. And then finally I like to do swimming because it helps me to, do a lot of upper body compared to, doing cycling and running, which is lower body. And the good thing about swimming is that it helps me also to train my breathing. When you are like out of breath on the cart, and it's pretty much similar when you're swimming, and you have to kind of sometimes you have to hold your breath from corner to corner as in a little bit of apnea, something like that. That's pretty much what happens when you're driving. Sometimes you're holding your breath here and there just because you're going through the corners and you have a lot of G, etc. But okay, let's not go into that. But the point being is that you should work really hard when you're not on the track, so that when you're on the track, you're going to be fitter and you're going to be able to sustain longer distances, longer days, longer sessions, and arrive at the end of the day without being tired, which is key if you want to have performance at the end of the day. And if you're trying to go for big championships, big series, and if you're have any sort of ambition of then arriving higher and higher in your career, perhaps in Formula One even, then you have to start training early on in your career. You can't just expect to show up at the track and be like, hey, here I am, let's go driving, putting your helmet on and drive, and then you go back home, you just play Minecraft, Fortnite, and whatever other game, or just like while doing your homeworks and just watching TikTok and Instagram, and then doing nothing as a couch potato, and then going back to the track, and you're like unfit and everything. No, you have to work a lot when you are at home, so that when you arrive at the track, you're fit. You should never feel tired. Honestly, it's a very bold statement what I said, because it happens sometimes to me when I'm like driving in the summer and it's like 35 degrees Celsius, and I will be doing like 150 laps in a day because I try to get myself fit and everything like for racing. That's pretty much what I'm doing right now. I'm like training a lot in Franciacorta with my shifter, with my Sodi KZ. Yeah, I drive myself to exhaustion because I want to push my boundaries even more, like my limits even more. Even though I do a lot of training up front when I'm home, So I try to spend at least 1.5 hours per day. I'm gonna do all sorts of things even when I'm on the track with BabyRace. I'm like working all day from 7 in the morning to like 7 in the afternoon, and then I go back either to the hotel if we're racing somewhere far from our home. Yeah, either at the hotel or back home, and I'm gonna be training for before going to bed. And I think that's a good discipline to acquire, and it just helps me a lot with even becoming mentally strong. Because think about it, when you're doing a lot of like physical exercises and you feel like stopping, it's a mental exercise, pushing beyond your boundaries and being like, "Oh, okay, I'm not gonna stop, I'm gonna keep pushing. One more kilometer, one more kilometer, one more kilometer," if you're running or if you're cycling. And I normally I see this a lot when I go cycling up the hills. Sometimes I do reps. So for example, when I feel very well, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go up the hill. So it's gonna be like, I don't know, 25 minutes uphill without going down. And then I'm like, when I feel like, okay, let's do it again. So I go down the hill and then I go up the hill again. So it's like, it's quite tiring, obviously, but it pushes your boundaries also mentally and you become stronger. But the point being of this video was mainly about the physical side. And remember, when you are going to be fitter, you're going to be having fatigue later on. You're going to push your fatigue threshold further and further, you know? Be it the number of laps consecutive in a specific session or the number of laps consecutive in a day or during a weekend. So you're going to push that threshold further and further. But remember, this is very important what I'm about to say. You can train as much as you want at home. You can train as hard as you want at home, but if you're not spending actual time on the go-kart, it's not going to be as effective because you are training some specific muscles when you're driving that you're not able to train when you're at the gym. You can train with your neck, you can train your forearms, you can train your core stability, which are basically the most essential. You can train your back as well when you're in the gym, which are basically the most essential parts, elements of your body that are being under stress when you're driving. But the reality is there are so many micro muscles, so many movements, like they're different compared to when you are doing anything else in the gym. And so the reason why I believe that you need to really spend a lot of time on the track is because you're going to train all sorts of muscles and all sorts of procedures, you know, reflexes and everything that you just can't physically do it in any other form. Even if you're driving the simulator, which by the way, I highly question that. You know, if you're driving a karting simulator, don't get me started on that. I have a very harsh opinion on that. But the point being is that you need to train also when you're on the track, and when you're on the track, therefore you have to make a lot of laps. Possibly, you know, in a free testing day when there's no real, you know, it's not really race weekend. Where, for example, WSK race weekends, you have like only 3-4 sessions per day, typically 4. But yeah, it's like they're very short. It's like 10 minutes, and so in 10 minutes maximum you can do is like 10-11 laps. Therefore, if you multiply 10-11 laps times 4, it's like 40 to 45 laps, and it's not a lot because in a testing day you can do up to 150 laps if you're committed, and so it's like 3-4 times almost as much as doing in a WSK or European Championships day, average day on the track. So when you arrive at the track, you have to be really, really well prepared. And you know, once you do days of 150 laps and you do it 1, 2, or 3 days like that in a row, then when you'll be doing like a 5-6 days WSK race week, because by the way, this year is the first time they do the 6 days race week in WSK, starting from the Final Cup in November, October. You can do WSK since Tuesday till Sunday. So I mean, it's not like a prerequisite. People can join on the Wednesday or even on the Thursday, but I will speculate that most drivers are gonna come on the Tuesday. And if they would say come on the Monday, people will start to drive also on the Monday. I mean, it's that competitive. I mean, if you don't do that, probably everybody else will, and so you will have a disadvantage compared to the others. So the point being is that yeah, well, it's very simple. I mean, you have to remember that yeah, the more you're fit, so the fitter you are, the better decision making you will do because you will be less fatigued. So the fitter you are, the less fatigue. The less fatigue, the better decision making. If we put it vice versa, in the opposite, is the more fatigue you get, the worse decision making you do. And you know, decision making is everything in karting, because like when you have decision, like the deciding when to brake, I know it's instinct, but again, your instincts don't work very well when you're under stress, when you're under fatigue, you know, when you're tired, and also like overtaking, you know, start procedures, all sorts of things going through the racecraft, they're very highly affected on decision making. And hence, if your decision making isn't strong, isn't sharp because of your fitness level, well, then you are going to struggle out in the race. Let me know what you think. That's my personal opinion. But remember, working on your fitness, doubling down on your fitness, I don't think specifically lap times. I think it's going to give you better consistency over a race distance or over a stint. For sure, you're going to make less mistakes. But yeah, it's gonna give you that more control, more consistency, more, control of yourself, and therefore less fatigue, which is going to cause mistakes, going to cause, wrong decisions. So train hard, and your decision making is going to be far, far better than if you didn't. Try to always go out there and make an extra session, an extra lap or two, an extra lap or two per session, an extra session. Try to go an extra day driving. I understand that, like driving more and more, exciting to drive 10 days a month versus driving 20 days a month. It's highly constrained on time and finance, like money. So I understand that, it's not like everybody can drive every day of their lives. It would be awesome. I understand you guys watching this video are probably very, very passionate as I am. I had the luck when I was in my juniors and seniors year. I was like my prime of my career. I was lucky because I lived 25, 30 minutes away from this and from Lonato, basically. I'm living here on the lake, and it was nice because I would stop school at like 12:30 a.m. and then I would be able to go to the track. I'll get there by 1 p.m. and normally like I would have my mechanic there waiting for me, and I would be doing the full afternoon session. It would be like 4 sessions. But the great thing in Lonato is that, for those ones who know, when you go doing an average day on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, like when it's not like a race week, you can go and do there's basically going to be 45 minutes long sessions. It's going to be like 45 minutes juniors, seniors, KZ, like all the adult cards, and then 40 minutes adult cards and 20 minutes mini cards. And therefore, like you could do like 4 sessions in the afternoon of 40 minutes. And if you look at that, it's like you can get up to 110, 120 laps. So even doing just the afternoon, you could crank so many laps. And typically in the afternoon, the track would always be quite good in Lonato, especially in the summer. In the morning, the track is always a bit slippery because the rental cars drive in the evening, the evenings before. And therefore, there's a bunch of shitty tire on the track in the first session or two in the morning of Lonato. So I think that's pretty much the case in most of the tracks where there's a lot of tourism, where there's a lot of rental karting going on in the evening. So, I mean, yeah, then I was driving in the afternoons, and it was quite fun because, I mean, not fun. I mean, it was quite nice because you would arrive and the track would be the best. Normally, the track in Lonato is the best in the last session of the morning. So like 11:30, 12 a.m. That's the best session in the morning. But then in the afternoon, it stays consistent. It doesn't really lose. Then it loses probably a tenth, 1.5 tenths, 2 tenths maximum the track from the peak. But anyways, I didn't really care about that too much. I was going there just to train, just to get better, and that allowed me to win a lot of races in Lonato. And but yeah, so if you guys had the same luck or chance to go and drive multiple times in a week, perhaps you have a track where it's very close from your school or from your home, and after school you can go and go driving is in the afternoon, perhaps with your own cart, perhaps with the team or whatever. For sure, the more driving, the more training on the track, and the more training off the track, so cycling, running, or even doing gym. But the thing is, when you do gym exercises, you build more strength, which you don't really need too much strength when you're driving. Like I've noticed, I used to be super, super, super bulky. I was 12 kilos more 1 year ago. But then I was like, oh, come on, let's do some races in karting. Because I was like, it was 5 years since my last race in karting. So I'm like preparing myself for the World Championship now. And I'm like, okay, let's get back to racing a bit. I mean, like, I feel like I'm a bit of a dog in a cage. Like I feel like I want to unleash my passion and my competitiveness. So I was like, okay, I drove again, like, was that 6 months ago, first time after 5 years. And I was like, I was very bulky. I was 12 kilos more. And again, not only did I have problems with the weight, being a bit overweight, but it's not a big problem there. The problem was that, yeah, when you're having too many muscles and too bulky on a go-kart, you're not gonna last a lot. You'll be like 5-6 laps, and then it's like you're done, you're tired, And so, whereas when you are fit, like when you are nice and lean, when you have more endurance, more resistance, so you have like the muscles are a little like trained for resistance rather than trained for strength. Because back last year and 2 years ago, I've been doing a lot of gym training for strength, lifting a lot of weights, doing a lot like short reps. But that kind of muscle is not needed in karting. So stay away from like overly intense gym training that has a lot of weights with low reps. Stay away from that, I would say, because that's not going to help you in karting. I don't really think so. You can still do, I think, gym exercises and like do more like body weight exercises, or like push-ups and like squats, etc. Like, that's still helpful. Even though my preference right now is to just go outdoor and do a lot of endurance, because even shifters, which is probably the most physical karting category, because you know you have gears, you have a lot of acceleration longitudinally, both because you have the front brake, so you are, when you're braking, you're decelerating very aggressively, and also when you're throttling, your neck is going like that a bit, and so you're like, it's yeah, everybody could agree that it's the most challenging, most physical category. But what I've noticed is that I'm totally fine. I'm totally fresh after driving like 150 laps in a day, just by training mostly on endurance, on training my stamina. So trying like as I said, cycling, running, and swimming. And then I do a lot of core exercises. I do a lot of like planks and exercises for my back and for my rib cages, etc. But that's just on the side. But as I said, I'm not doing any more like strength exercises, because I don't feel like it's really needed. And it's funny because the more the stronger I feel I am on the kart, like the stronger I train, like as I did previously, the less the resistant you are. You feel like strong for a few laps, but then you're like starting to lose your back a little bit. You're starting to lose your neck. It's quite, I don't know, it's quite strange. That's what I've noticed. Because I said, when you train your muscle for like a short intensity and short time and high intensity, it's not the same as training it for long time and low intensity. Okay, that's very important to distinguish. So if you want to be fitter, to have less fatigue when you're driving, for better decision making, which is basically what this video is all about, remember to do mostly cardio exercises, resistance training, and body weight exercise. I think that's really what you need in karting. Then obviously that's a different thing if you're talking about formula cars, because in formula cars you have a little bit more G's on your back, on your neck. You need stronger legs. When you brake, you have to stamp the brakes. So when you go to formula, like, you need to do much more work on the gym. You have to be quite a bit stronger on your legs and on your back, as well as your neck and your arms as well, and your a bit of like your shoulders too, forearms. So when you are doing preparation for single seaters, that's a bit different from karting. But yeah, still you will have a lot of cardio exercises there as well, because for example in cars, when you're doing a 1 hour long race distance, for example in Formula 2, you need to stay for an hour at 170, 175, even sometimes 180, 185 heartbeat per minute, the BPM. So it's like your heart rate is always high. And if you're not trained for that, you're gonna run out of energy. You're gonna run out of steam, and you're fatigued. You're gonna get highly fatigued. You're gonna make mistakes. And in single seater, just missing the braking point by a couple of meters can mean like missing the apex, locking the tires, getting a flat spot, or even going in the wall if you're racing street circuits. So, and that can be even very costly financially, not just in terms of results or lap time. So let me know what you think in the comments about this video. I'm pretty excited about this, and I hope you enjoyed it. I mean, or at least got some useful information. Remember, that's my opinion. I'm not always perfect. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist in this case, specifically regarding like physical training. I'm just giving you my perspective, my opinion, my experience, whether you like it or you don't like it. But still, I'll be happy to continue the conversation in the comments for future reference.